The Yeoman Warders of Her Majesty's Royal Palace and Fortress the Tower of London are members of the Sovereign's bodyguard of the Yeoman Guard Extraordinary, popularly known as the Beefeaters, ceremonial guardians of the Tower of London. In principle, they are responsible for looking after any prisoners in the Tower and safeguarding the British Crown jewels. But in practice they act as tour guides and are a tourist attraction in their own right, a point the Yeoman Warders acknowledge. In 2011, there were 37 Yeoman Warders and 1 Chief Warder. All warders are retired from the Armed Forces of Commonwealth realms and must be former senior non-commissioned officers or petty officers with at least 22 years of service. They must also hold the Long Service and Good Conduct Medal. The Yeoman Warders are often incorrectly referred to as Yeomen of the Guard, which is actually a distinct corps of royal bodyguards. Etymology. Although the Yeoman Warders are often referred to as Yeomen of the Guard, which is a distinct corps of royal bodyguards of the British monarch, they are in fact a separate entity within this guard. Gilbert and Sullivan's opera, The Yeoman of the Guard, is set in the 16th century, an earlier era before the two corps were split apart. It concerns what are today the Yeoman Warders. Beefeater. The name Beefeater is of uncertain origin, with various proposed derivations. The term was common as early as the 17th century as a slang term for the English in general. The earliest connection to the royal household came as a reference to the Yeoman of the Guard by Cosimo III de' Medici, Grand Duke of Tuscany, who frequented the court in 1669. In referring to the Yeoman of the Guard, he stated, "A very large ration of beef is given to them daily at the court, and they might be called Beefeaters." The Beefeater name was carried over to the Yeoman Warders, due to the two corps' outward similarities and the Yeoman Warders' more public presence. Beefeaters also commonly produced and consumed broths made of beef, which were described as rich and hearty. These broths were known, at the time, as beef or beefy. While this is the most cited origin, including by the corps themselves, some etymologists have noted the term's similarity to hlafaeta, the Old English term for a menial servant, lit. Loaf-eater, the counterpart of lafford, loaf-warden, and haidage, which became lord and lady, respectively. Conjectures that derive the name from buffeteer are not considered probable. History. The Tudor yeomen, the Yeoman Warders, were formed in 1485 by the new King Henry VII, the first monarch of the Tudor dynasty, and the Tudor Rose, a heraldic badge of the dynasty, is part of the badge of the Yeoman Warders to this day. In 1509 Henry VIII moved his official place of residence from the Tower of London. The Tower did however initially retain the formal status of a royal palace, and to mark this a party of 12 yeomen of the guard were left in place, as a token garrison. The title of this detachment was subsequently changed to that of Tower Warders as a more accurate reflection of their actual duties. As warders without any ceremonial state functions, they forfeited the right to wear the scarlet royal livery of the now separate Yeomen of the Guard. This was however restored to them during the reign of Edward VI, reportedly at the request of a High Court official who had been briefly imprisoned in the Tower and was impressed by the behavior of the warders. The original Tudor Guard was split into two categories, the Ordinary Guard and the additional troops of the Extraordinary. In 1550, for example, the Ordinary mustered 105 men, with an additional 300 Extraordinary yeomen. Until 1549, the guards at the Tower were numbered among the Extraordinary, but in that year were raised to the status of Ordinary yeomen. There was a considerable wage difference between the two groups. In 1562, a yeoman of the ordinary received 16d per day, whereas an extraordinary yeoman was paid the same as a common infantryman. In 1551, the ordinary was expanded to 200 men, of whom 100 were to be archers and 100 halberdiers, but these numbers were not maintained. Uniform at this time was a velvet coat trimmed with silver gilt, worn over armor. Current composition and duties. In 2011, there were 37 Yeoman Warders and 1 Chief Warder. All warders are retired from the Armed Forces of Commonwealth realms and must be former senior non-commissioned officers with at least 22 years of service. They must also hold the Long Service and Good Conduct Medal. Traditionally, only NCOs from the Army, Royal Marines and Royal Air Force were eligible to apply, as unlike members of the other services, members of the Royal Navy do not swear an oath of allegiance to the Crown. This is because the Navy is not maintained by an active Parliament but instead under the royal prerogative. The first naval yeoman warder was sworn in 2011. The yeoman warders normally wear an undress uniform of dark blue with red trimmings. When the sovereign visits the Tower, or the warders are on duty at a state occasion, they wear red and gold uniforms similar to those of the yeomen of the Guard. These uniforms are referred to by the yeoman warders as the Tudor state dress, due to the uniform having very little modification from when they were first introduced during the Tudor dynasty, and are said to be extremely uncomfortable. The yeoman warders and the families live in tied accommodation inside the fortress, paying council taxes and a portion of the salaries for rent. They must own a home outside of the fortress to go to when they retire. Some of the accommodation dates back to the 13th century. The community of the Tower of London is made up of these yeoman warders and the families, the resident governor and officers, a chaplain and a doctor. Yeoman warders participate in the ceremony of the keys each night. On the 1st of July 2007, a servicewoman, Moira Cameron, became the first female yeoman warder in the history of the institution. Cameron joined the army in 1985 at age 20. Aged 42 and Warrant Officer Class 2, she became eligible not long before her appointment. Previously, she served as Superintendent Clerk at a brigade headquarters with the Adjutant General's Corps. In 2009, 2 male Beefeaters were dismissed for the bullying of Cameron. 3 warders were suspended, and 1 was subsequently reinstated following the month-long investigation, with his role unproven. Ravenmaster. The Yeoman Warder Ravenmaster is one of the yeoman warders who has the responsibility to maintain the welfare of the ravens of the Tower of London. The ravens are fed raw meat which is bought at Smithfield Meat Market by the Ravenmaster. It is believed ravens have been living in the Tower of London since at least the time of King Charles II, and legend maintains that should the ravens ever leave the Tower and the monarchy will crumble. When he received complaints that the ravens interfered with observatory work, Charles ordered the resiting of the Royal Observatory to Greenwich rather than remove the ravens. In order to prevent the ravens from flying away, the flight feathers are trimmed, so that they cannot fly in a straight line for any appreciable distance. The ravens are free, however, to roam the Tower grounds. The current yeoman warder Ravenmaster in the Tower of London is Chris Skyfe, who took over from Ray Stones in April 2011. The warders comment that the real Beefeaters at the Tower of London are the ravens, which receive a daily ration of beef.